Hi, everyone. Welcome back to class number 11 of the shared housing class. Today, we are going to be talking about the difference between a nonprofit and an LLC, a attorney referral, but of course, you can search for any type of attorney options that you would like. And then we'll also get into some information from the United States government around shared housing and homelessness and what they're really doing to help support people who are in this space, as well as the VA. So the Veterans Administration has their hospital to housing grants that they run. And then there are additional grants that you can apply for. There are almost so many grants that it can become overwhelming. And so on this class number 11, let's get started with if you want to set up a nonprofit and how you might go about doing that. What I did actually is I worked with Kareem Hanafi from Anderson Advisors, and I thought that he did a great job. You can email his staff at nonprofits@andersonadvisors.com. He is a wonderful human being and uh, is very knowledgeable in the space. And so if you wanted to reach out to him, you now have his team's email. Maybe they'll put you on the email list if you want to participate in some of these classes. So they did run a how to start and run a nonprofit workshop in October. So that was about a month ago. And they'll probably have more of these if you would like to learn more about starting a nonprofit through Anderson Business Advisors. Now, Anderson Business Advisors, in my experience, they do prepare LLCs and other types of structures. So you may want to look at, forming LLCs through them. I personally have a lot of different attorneys who I use. So I'm not trying to give out all of my attorney information, but certainly this is one option that you may want to look into and look at their pricing as well. There are other shared housing classes as well, and I would encourage you to take any type of education in this shared housing space that you can take. There's not a whole lot of classes, and so I think that every little bit does help. And just keep in mind some of the things that you've learned in this class. The 12 hours here have really been intended to be more on the analytical and business side of things, whereas some other classes that I'm aware of, they don't lean as heavily on the spreadsheets and the documents, which is why we decided at the Normalized Money Project that this class would be beneficial to add to some of those other classes that may or may not be available to you in your state. And of course, you'll want to keep the cost down as much as you can. So that way you can have a reserve fund, because when you are going into a nonprofit or a new LLC, those expenses can add up pretty quickly, and you definitely want to know what you're getting yourself into. So that way you have a very clear business plan before you go and start inviting people into some type of a house, right? So same thing with a short-term rental, Airbnb, and all those kinds of things, long-term rentals. All right, now that you have Kareem's information and Anderson Business Advisors, I do want to talk to you a little bit about one of the benefits that I saw signing up to be a nonprofit or establishing a nonprofit 501c3. Now, I had a nonprofit before I did a housing nonprofit. And so that's, of course, the Normalized Money Project. And it's really, it transfers to both of them as far as the tax benefits goes, and it's easier to fill out tax returns, at least in the first couple years. That's just my personal experience. Normally on an LLC or a corporation, an S Corp or a C Corp, you'll have annual fees as well as the tax returns can be more complicated. And so those annual fees are with the Secretary of State, they're with the local governments, and then, of course, you have your federal and state tax returns. So keep that in mind and talk to the attorney about those costs, and your CPA about those costs. So that way you can see if setting up a 501c3, which is this type of designation for this housing nonprofit, or some of the others. Essentially, just check on that cost. I think for us, it runs around $60 a year for filing the return. It's a very simple nonprofit return versus an elaborate, what can be elaborate for an LLC. And my personal belief is that you should have both, because if you're owning property, then your LLC would own the property. And then your nonprofit actually operates a business. And so it might lease your properties from your LLC, or it could lease other properties from other people's LLCs. And my understanding is that you would not want to have a nonprofit owning property unless you intend to donate that, or that nonprofit to, they're going to own that property. And that's different than an LLC that can buy and sell property and do different things. So you really want to talk with a nonprofit attorney and find out what the limitations are, for both, and the benefits are for both. So that way you don't have your nonprofit maybe owning things that you didn't intend for it to own. What we're looking at right now is, this is called TechSoup. And TechSoup is really great for 501c3s because they provide software and technology to nonprofits, charities, and libraries at a substantial discount, and sometimes entirely free. So when you have Office 365 to operate your company specific to your shared housing, and if it's a nonprofit, of course, then they will verify that for you, and you could potentially get free software that way. Also, I think DocuSign and PayPal and a lot of different types of benefits come with being a nonprofit, or having a nonprofit, tax identification number, and using it for charitable purposes within whatever your purpose is and your mission is. And Kareem will help you write that, or his team can help you write that. And then once you have your tax identification number, you can start applying to different things as a nonprofit 501c3. And even inside of here, I just want you to know that there is an opportunity inside of TechSoup to obtain grants. So that is one reason that I'm really covering this for you, is this episode is also going to be largely around additional grant funding and trying to focus on the best way to get yourself some grants. Also, my understanding is that a nonprofit lives on in legacy. So my understanding is if you want to leave your nonprofit to your children or your spouse or to other people, you can do that more easily than an LLC or some other type of business. Again, that's something that you're going to want to check with a nonprofit attorney. Moving on to what the United States government is doing right now regarding homelessness and some other types of populations. So keep in mind that, at least, my understanding is that if you can't get yourself clean, and maybe if you have some mental health challenges, which can come and go, based on things that happen in your life over the course of so many years, right? So maybe as children, we see kids that are foster care, we see that they are illegal immigrants to no fault of their own. They, need a place to stay. And if they can't be housed in one of your houses, whoever you are that is listening right now, then they actually will become homeless or worse, meaning that they might get tangled up in human trafficking or labor trafficking, or, you know, there's so many different things that we don't want to happen to people, especially vulnerable children. And then, of course, as people age, maybe they get a divorce and they can't afford or qualify for an apartment. So, an apartment normally costs 3 times the rent. As you guys know, if you're landlords or if you talk to your property manager, they're going to let you know these things. And so, if you're on this class, you may or may not have rentals, and you might work with the affluent community. And if that is what you want to continue doing, working with the affluent community where they have money and they're able to pay you, then it's good for you to make that decision now than to go into shared housing or any kind of roommate housing situation and think that that is going to be something where it's the same. Maybe monetarily it could be the same. However, as it relates to the day-to-day operation, you really need to put in place the pieces that work for you. And I hope that shelter-registry.com is one of those major pieces. We're not going to cover it in this particular class. We'll cover it in class number 12 when we talk about how to get residents and how to tie everything together with police and social workers. But I just want you guys to know that the United States government, they need you. The federal, the state, and the local government, they need real estate investors to put in the effort to help people who cannot otherwise help themselves for a period of time. That is why you're on this class. And so I hate to be so dry. I'm very analytical because I want you to make money and I want you to be successful. And so let's keep going through this all-in document, which I will include in your documents. This comes directly from the White House in 2022, just about, 11 months ago. And essentially what the government is saying is that, and even President Obama and a lot of presidents before them, is that homelessness is actually increasing and they continue to try and drive that number down. And who is going to step up to the plate to help? And President Biden was looking to reduce homelessness by 25% by January 2025. And so if your focus is to help people before they become homeless, I think that is very honorable. And most people would agree with that, especially if you are a registered nonprofit and it's a charitable mission. Now, I will tell you that when you have a nonprofit, it is set up as a corporation. So it's a C Corp. That's how, at least I'm aware that they're set up as C Corps. And what that means is that you would pay yourself through the C Corp. So it's not that you're not getting paid, it's that your charity is working for a special mission and you are defining that mission with your attorney, and then you're tax exempt and you get reduced cost on other types of things, generally speaking. And you can also, in some cases, give out donation receipts. And you can also work with the government and other nonprofits. A lot of nonprofits like to work together to help one another. And so here you have an opportunity to work with the United States government to implement their plan of ensuring more Americans have safe, stable, and affordable homes. So, of course, then our entire country is much stronger. People, of course, can't have good employment if they can't live and take showers and sleep really well. So, for everyone who says, why don't they just get a job? The truth is, people may not have identification to get a job, and they might not have a place long enough, meaning 6 months, to get themselves a job and actually go to work for 6 months and save enough money. So it just becomes an endless cycle of people never really getting on their feet if the length of stay is a short length of stay. And if there are not enough outside supports outside of the house. So, not to say that your house needs to have paid employees or paid volunteers, but you certainly need to be clear on how the people who live inside your homes are being, supported. It's probably outside of the house. Now, remember, shared housing could be where you have people who, like two families, live together with or without their children, and they share a house. It could be where it's roommate housing. However, that is a different definition. Roommate housing is normally just regular roommate housing, and they may or may not use drugs. They may or may not have mental concerns and supports. Um, and so I think roommate housing really delineates that they're self-sufficient and you're not involved. You're not recognizing that they might have some type of vulnerability. Whereas what the government is talking about and what a lot of these grants are speaking to is that you, as an investor, are operating the house. You're a housing provider and you recognize that the person is vulnerable, and you are requiring that their probation officer and that their community work with them, or at least you're pointing that person outwards to their probation officer and their community in the house rules in order for them to live in your house. So that is where that house rule would come in. And then you have to enforce that house rule. So, and you have to remove the people if they don't abide by these house rules. So I hope that you've had some time to read through this as I've been talking. These are messages, of course, from some of the directors there in the United States government. So we're dealing with the HUD secretary, who is responsible for giving out millions and millions of dollars in money that goes normally to the mayor, and then the mayor turns around and gives that money out to people who have requested it for housing. And also we have the VA Secretary, Dennis McConnell here. So the Veterans Administration, has done a good job of reducing homelessness in that population. And that would be something that you would want to look into if you're interested in dealing with veterans, which we will talk about a grant for veterans here pretty soon in this particular class. I would encourage you to read over this document and pull out email addresses, or anything that's of use to you for the populations that you would like to help, and really focus on developing relationships with the people in our government who are also responsible to help those same communities. They do have lots and lots and lots of money that they are giving out to real estate investors who can identify who they want to help, how they are going to go about helping them, and in what areas they can help those populations. Make sure that your pricing is really competitive, but also it must be sustainable. Please make sure it's sustainable. It's going to take you several months to develop these relationships. And if you're already an investor, that's perfect because you can say that you have a track record of having long-term rentals and short-term rentals. And now you're interested in working with, let's say, veterans. And as soon as you can get this relationship firmed up with whoever it is that's in charge of that grant, then you are willing to start letting veterans come in. It's pretty simple to put in some beds, order those up off of Walmart, and take a week to get your house converted. That's actually not too hard. I would say 2 weeks because you'll have to buy your insurance policy if you want to have that additional insurance for social services purposes. And then also, you'll probably want to set up a nonprofit, but that's up to you. And some grants might require that you have that nonprofit tax identification number. So I'm not going to read through this whole document. I'm just going to, scan a few things so that way you guys can see there are many different agencies across the country who need your help. If you don't contact them, they will not know that your housing exists. It's not that you failed to do this right. It's that you failed to contact them, 10 times with a clear email and a clear website, letting them know that you care, because you are literally music to their ears. It's just getting them to tune out the noise and give you their ear because, of course, they're busy individuals too. And so having your ducks in a row is going to be very important. Charity and making sure that it's done right so that the people are safe and that the money is being put to its highest and best use. And they are going to be checking for that when you talk with them, whoever it is that you talk with. And it's not going to be fast. It's going to take a lot of time. So be prepared for that. And that's okay, because if you are the only investor in your area and you have 500 houses for veterans and it takes you 10 years to do that, you could be making a good amount of passive income and leaving a legacy for your family. So pretty amazing, because a lot of investors are not doing this. You have a blue ocean here. And just like anything else, it takes work. So I hate to be patronizing. I don't mean to be. I'm just trying to be realistic on these last couple classes, because I think people start to tune out and they just want to go and run right into this and start making phone calls and setting up things. They're a nonprofit. It's exciting to get a new company name. It's exciting to do all these things, but it's not exciting to not make money. So please stay on for these last 2 hours and then spend the 30 days or 60 days that it takes for you to come up with your own plan, whatever it is that works for you, and to start developing these relationships over the course of 6 months. So that way you can have a profitable legacy and not get burnt out, because a lot of people do get burnt out. or it takes them 10 years to set up 10 houses because that first house can be pretty difficult if you don't have something like shelter-registry.com to list your house at, and then to let your government friends, once you start making government friends or social services friends, know that's where they can find your facility, because you're going to have people transitioning in and out of your house. And this is a new niche as it relates to the amount of people who need help, because there are 10,000 people per day coming into the country, to the United States. 10,000 people per day. If you live in a city that's 60,000 people, your city would be full in 6 days. And these people are being bussed around the country trying to find a place to stay. And of course, you have Department of Human Health Services trying to find them places to stay. You have all types of government bodies trying to provide them medical care and community resources. And there is not enough housing for those individuals either, let alone in general for paying. And right, we just have a housing shortage in the United States. But then that's for people who have money to pay and who have an identification. Think about the people who don't have money and who don't have an identification, and then the social workers who are literally trying to figure out, and the police officers, where can they live that is safe? Well, you are that solution. So you guys go ahead and read this when you have some time, and let's move on to the Department of Veteran Affairs. This is a funding opportunity in 2022. You can, of course, search this same opportunity every single year. I would encourage you to do that because veterans are throughout our entire country, of course, and so that is a wide open net for funding. What I wanted to share with you on this is that there are different types of housing within this grant application or, overview. So this one, which is the hospital to housing, which we're going to get into, this was running for 3 years, starting in fiscal year 2024. If you've never seen a grant overview before, it normally is going to tell you right away what the cutoff date is. Make sure you and your team, if you have one, I would suggest not having a big team because things can get very overwhelming for your teammates. So you should probably take all the onus as it relates to grants and money, because that's, important to make sure that money is coming in through grants, through private payers. If you have private payers, who have money on Social Security income, of course, there's going to be a huge need for baby boomers needing shared housing, and they will probably have Social Security and disability income. So that's good. But for this grant funding, which is different than Section 8, for this grant, this is just going to come into you every month once you get yourself set up. Make sure that you know when your application has to be into them, because it's very easy to miss the grant application dates. So here was the date here. Applications must be received. This was in February of this year. It tells you what to do. Maybe it'll take you one day to put this together. And to read through the information. You just have to tune out the noise if you would like to make the income. Other investors are not doing that. So I'm super excited that you guys are able to have this opportunity and getting into the actual types of housing. You'll see here that this on page 7, this is bridge housing. So this is a bed model designed for veterans experiencing homelessness who have been offered and have accepted a permanent housing intervention but are not able to immediately enter the permanent housing. So this is one type of bed model. And here's the length of stay. And they're saying that it's about 90 days. And this is the admission criteria. And so this is where we talked about measurable impact. And you should be able to know what your measurable impact is going to be if somebody asks you. Now, here is hospital to housing respite care. And I think actually we might have overlooked one. Let's see. Oh, clinical treatment. So here's clinical treatment. That's a different type of structure. And so you'll see this bed model is designed for veterans experiencing homelessness with a specific diagnosis related to substance use disorder and or mental health diagnosis. And so this is if they engage in clinical services. What's really great about the VA stuff is that they normally have VA buses that can bus around these individuals, so you don't have to worry about that part of it. Can they get transportation? Can they get medical care? The answer to those questions for VA is generally yes, they can. So that's really great because your house is really then you're just a housing provider. You're not having to worry about those other types of things if those are, they're getting the level of care that they need to from the VA. And you'll see that the length of stay for that model is generally 6 to 12 months, not to exceed 24 months. So if you want to choose to do this for the next couple years and then apply for this clinical treatment grant, you know that if you set up your nonprofit and this is who you're going to work with for insurance purposes and website purposes, and then you start contacting people in the VA who are housing specialists, those are the people that are looking to put the person in your house. They're a housing specialist. So they're looking for a housing provider. This is a counselor or someone at the VA hospital and every VA hospital. Then you can go in and you can ask for that person at your local place, or you can call your state and try and figure out who handles that. But basically, when these veterans are at the hospital or in a VA program and they don't have a place to go to, well, they could go to your place and you could charge for that for 6 to 12 months. Not to exceed 24 months. And that's a really great length of stay for that person to be able to go and get treatment at the VA hospital, get bussed around by the VA hospital, and not be out on the street next to people who are maybe shooting up heroin or selling it, right? And then here are your measurable impacts. So your job as a housing provider would be to have a clean house, in my opinion, and to try and inspire them in one way or another to essentially get permanent housing. You would want 65 out of 100 participants. when they leave your house, let's say after 12 months. I would say probably more like 24 months, because it takes people about 24 months to fix their credit. And then they would have to apply for a lease for permanent housing, unless you went to Veterans Way. They do look to place people in permanent housing, and that's a different grant. And like I said, they look for LLCs for permanent housing. So there's two different things happening there. You could do this particular grant for 2 years with the intent of working with United Way and their Veterans Way, you know, that segment of their organization, to help that veteran convert from your shared house, where the VA is paying for your shared house, and then now you work with that nonprofit, United Way, to get them into one of your LLCs that offers a long-term lease for 12 months. So then you would be helping the vet probably for more like 3 years. But I would think that your property manager is going to want to check that at that point, they're relatively stable. They're not on drugs and alcohol. And even if United Way is paying for them and you have a 1-year lease, now you do have a tenant landlord situation. I don't know if that's a week-to-week lease, even if it's for 1 year, is the goal, of course. Or if you just would do a straight, 1 year, in which case you couldn't exit them because of whatever the laws are. So you're just going to have to decide, where do you want to take your funding from? You already know the person needs help, so they're probably not going to private pay in some of these cases, in most cases. And it's just really important that you have an exit strategy for that person. You can, of course, encourage all of your residents to subscribe to Make Money with Katie's House. That's our foundation channel. And we do personal finance lessons for free at this point on YouTube, only 10 minutes a week. Really the nitty-gritty for people in recovery and teens, so that way they can make sure that they take that 1 to 2 years that they're in your shared house, that they are getting themselves financially ready to sign a long-term lease. And of course, they need to get themselves a job. And you don't want more than 20%. So no more than 20 out of 100 people in 1 year. If that's, kind of how you're doing things. Maybe you take in 10 people every month or every 6 months. And so if you took in, whatever those numbers are, negative exits are less than 20%. So basically, you only want to take in people who you feel are really wanting the housing and going to be working whatever program it is, either inside the house or outside the house. We talked about this hospital to housing respite care, just going over that title there. And this bed model is designed for veterans experiencing homelessness who are identified and evaluated inpatient care settings and emergency departments suitable for direct transfer to designated projects for transitional housing and supportive care. And so this is people who have been hospitalized, veterans that have been hospitalized. Length of stay is 6 to 12 months, not to exceed 24 months. And you will also start seeing characteristics and standards whenever there's a grant, especially a housing grant. And right here, it's telling you that the project is small, typically 10 beds or less. And this one, housing sites are expected to be in close proximity to the referring VA medical facility so that ongoing clinical care, including specialty care, can be provided. So make sure that you read all of this. And then if it's requesting an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. So right here it's saying applicants must have an up-to-date memorandum of understanding in place with the local VA medical facility that details participation in the hospital to housing bed model. So you can actually pull an MOU legal agreement online and then go over that with your attorney. Just Google free MOU or free memorandum of understanding. And then you'll want to fill that out to the best of your ability and work with the local hospital. So that way you guys know this is what your house does, A, B, and C. This is what the hospital does, A, B, C, and D. And you guys don't necessarily cross over. You have a memorandum of understanding that, you know, everyone stays in their lane kind of a thing, because it can become somebody might think that the other person is doing something when they're not. It's really helpful to clarify in advance, that that's not something that your foundation does, such as you probably don't provide free housing. Some places might think that you provide free housing, whereas you would need to make that very clear up front, not necessarily for this VA grant, obviously, but for other people outside of grant funding. I just want to let you know that generally speaking, a lot of people think that nonprofits give money away and that they provide things for free. Some nonprofits, that is definitely their mission, and you'll want to work with those other nonprofits, but you're also going to want to be super clear that that is not what you do. You provide a house, and inside of that house, you provide X, Y, and Z, and that's really the end of that, right? So make sure that that's clear, that you let them know if you need them to provide social services or a van, that's part of their MOU. So the MOU will cover what do you do and what do they do. So you can keep going through this 44 pages and you'll see that there are different bed models, different target populations, different length of stay, and you can decide which one of these works best for you. And I did want to show you, this here was part of that document. It's actually a separate one, but it came with the same files. And so what this gets into is part 61, which is the VA Homeless Providers Grant and Per Diem Program. So remember, this means you're billing them per day for when people are staying with you, when veterans are staying at your house. So this could be women veterans, men, it could be any type of identifying party. And they do go over the awards, the monitoring, and the enforcement of agreements, and then the general operation requirements for supportive housing and service centers. And what you're going to see when you start reading through this, which this will be included with your documents, although this was for the year 2022-23 for that 3-year award, you're going to start seeing that they might require handrails, they might require glow-in-the-dark exit signs, of course, the egress in case of a fire. This is all normal stuff that a landlord really should have. When it comes to Americans with Disabilities Act, you should be referring to that information as well. Having enough space for people's belongings, acceptable place to sleep that is in compliance. So I've heard of places where they have 5 men in a 10 by 10 space. They actually put 2 bunk beds. So maybe it's 11 by 11. They'll do 2 bunk beds and then a single bed in the middle. And I'm not sure how the men can even get out if there's a fire, let alone then just roll off their bed, and get out of the room. There's really no room for anyone's belongings. So that is not something that I would recommend. In fact, I'm sure it doesn't meet code. Now, the National Alliance of Recovery Residences, they say that each person should have a 5 by 10 space. I know that in residential assisted living, some places say that each person should have 200 square feet each. And that's normally for people that are older and they have, walkers and canes. And, that's a different kind of a setting. But these are things that you're going to want to take into consideration. The same thing for number 8. The housing must have adequate heating or cooling facilities in proper operating condition. Natural light or adequate light. Smoke detectors, food preparation areas, make sure that there's a dishwasher so that things get sanitized and that people are actually using it. This is why you charge more, because you need to. That's just the brass tacks of it. You need to charge more because you're dealing with a higher risk population. And if, the people are not willing to pay, then you just won't be able to do business with them, because you can't be running a deficit and expect to stay as a corporation or an operating organization for very long. That is why people get burnout. They go into this with their heart, they reduce their prices, they don't have enough people in the house, or the people that are in the house are doing things that they're not supposed to, and there's a high turnover rate. So I really want you guys to be successful and to charge appropriately. You're going to find out that other people charge a lot of money. So if you want to charge that much, it might not even be quote unquote that much. You're seeing here number 13. 12 and 13, the residents with disabilities must be provided meals or meal preparation facilities must be available. So you're going to need to charge for that. Residential supervision from a paid staff member, volunteer, or senior resident participant must be provided 24 hours a day, 7 days per week. And for those times that a volunteer or senior resident participant is providing supervision, a paid staff member must be on call for emergencies. These are all the things and why people charge a $2,000 non-refundable entry fee in places like Birmingham, Alabama. And then they charge $1,200 per month. And that's not dealing with people coming out of the VA. That's just ordinary people. And those places, men and women facilities, are almost always full. That would be a level 3 NAR house. And I would say a level 2 NAR house should probably even be the same, quite frankly, really, because of the amount of work, that needs to go into it, at least in the beginning. Once you get things going, you could probably reduce your prices. So just know that in the beginning, like any business, it's going to be top heavy in the beginning. You're going to have to put in a good amount of money and time. And if you're working a full-time job, plan to do it in the evenings and the weekends, because you probably have a passion to do this and you want to leave a legacy for your children or for your community. So you can read through these kinds of things. In the next class number 12, I'm going to talk about how we were able to staff. And actually, for veterans, we found out it was the easiest to staff because veterans want to help other veterans. Okay, everyone. So I want to show you what an invoice looks like. This could be applicable to a university or a VA or some other type of grant that you are billing per diem. So you will have already put together your memorandum of understanding. You will have gotten your grant approved, and then now you're going to invoice them. And this is just a very simple invoice that normally they give to you or you can create. I'll put it in your documents as well, and you can change it. Essentially, it's going to have the person who you're emailing it to, the month of service and the year, the person's name, which is your resident, last for the social, the dates, and then your per diem rate, how many days you're paying for. You'll sign, you'll date it, and you'll email it in normally before the 15th of the month for the previous month's services. And looking here at this insurance, I wanted to bring you back to the insurance because some grants do require specialty insurance. And if you're dealing with the drug court, we have seen that for their grant, when you read it over, which I'm going to pull it up here, this is for University of Alabama. And this is what their drug court looks like, their vendor disclosure statement. Now, there are multiple statements that they might send over to you. So just contact the drug court in your area and ask them how you sign up to become a vendor. And then they will normally have their grant manager send over to you their vendor disclosure statement. And you do need to go through this with a fine-tooth comb, especially the last few pages. And make sure that you are seeing if they're requesting specialty insurance. So I'm not going to include this with the documents since it's specific to some of our relationships, but you can request it through whatever drug court it is that you would like to work with. And they will also send you over, if there's a HIPAA agreement, they'll send you the HIPAA business associate agreement. And this is going to have some really detailed information in it. Again, a lot of it is going to be towards the middle in the end. And one thing that I really wanted to point out is that if they request specialized insurance, you should look and see if there's any exemptions to getting that kind of insurance. For example, there might be certain kinds of systems that you use or multi-factor authentication. So this is around protecting people's information. And depending on your level of information technology security and what kind of systems you are using, there might be some exemptions from having to get additional insurance. So please make sure that you read through these agreements yourself and not task them out to other people inside your team. Whoever it is that's responsible for managing all of these contracts should really be the one, going through with a fine-tooth comb to see if the insurance is being impacted in any way or if there's exemptions to that. If you do find out that you need specialty insurance, go back to SEMA, to your broker, which if you're using SEMA, remember that's a brokerage, and ask them to send you over any of the applications that they have. You can contact carriers directly. There's a lot of different ways to go about getting specialty insurance. This is the traveler's application. If you need to have cyber insurance specific to dealing with medical information. And they might not even, meaning the referring party, Veterans Administration, they might not even give you any medical information when they refer someone over to you, but they might have some blanket agreements that say that you are going to protect whatever it is that they are sending or whatever it is that the resident is giving to you. And that's just a good business practice that you either don't intake that information because you don't need it for your operation, or that you have multi-factor authentication, right? That's two different types of um, controls for people to access the information. So generally, you wouldn't want to have this particular email address on your phone. Most phones don't have multi-factor authentication unless, of course, you're using your thumbprint to get in, and then having a secondary password or some way to get into the email. So you would need two different kinds of ways to access the email. But I just wanted you to be aware of this cyber risk application and that you might not need it if you don't put the people's information on a cloud. If you put it on the cloud, that's what you really need to be careful of, according to some of the IT professionals that we know. So a cyber insurance policy runs about $15,000 per year. If you are new to having that policy and you're having to establish, HIPAA compliance within your own operation. So if a drug court is asking you for this, you again want to read through yourself and see if there's anything in the meat of the contract that says that there's some exemptions if you're not using the cloud, things of that nature, because they will not pay your $15,000 in insurance. You could increase your bed rate, your per diem, and that may cover it. In our experience, they don't pay for entry fees, at least not in Alabama. They won't pay a non-refundable entry fee. They will just pay the per diem. And so all of your cost as a housing provider need to be built into that per diem. And they might say, wow, that's expensive. And you would just have to let them know that that is really the cost that you're passing on the per diem. And that's the cost of business right now. You want to help the people. That's everyone's goal. My understanding is that it costs between $80,000 and $90,000 per year for someone to be put in jail. And then they have to have the commercial building, they have to have the lights on, they have to staff a bunch of people, medical professionals, they have to bring in food. And your bed for that same person, assuming that is somebody who's maybe has a mild offense, whether it's drug related or not, instead of them having to go to jail or sit in the hospital and maybe they don't have health insurance, perhaps you're only charging $1,000 per month and $12,000 a year. Maybe you're charging $2,000 per month and $24,000 per year. And so that's what you just need to focus on, is not the comparison, but the fact that you have a bed and that you meet their parameters, because a lot of other people and companies won't take the time to read through the information, and therefore they don't have a lot of people coming to them and offering housing to them. If you go and you call the drug court and you offer housing, or you call the Veterans Administration and you offer housing to them, please make sure that you're prepared, because they do want to take your call. And here's another item. This is around funding. So there's more funding. I just wanted to show you, I just looked this up online. This is how much is being awarded through these different kinds of opportunities. So this was the second chance. That was the recipient. They received $200,000, emergency shelter and rapid rehousing. Do Google rapid rehousing and some of these other types of lengths of stay so that you are familiar with them, because they will ask you, what type of housing category do you fall into? Thank you for attending class number 11, and I will see you in class number 12.